So, a couple of weeks ago, there was a meeting here in this very space of about 24 accelerators. You were part of it. And in the middle of the meeting, somebody said, I think an accelerator is XYZ. Another person said, no, I don't think so. I think it's XYZ. And that was the spark that really brought this panel to life, because it was one crucial moment where we realized when we do a conference that's called Accelerator Awesome, we should, maybe talk about that very word. And I have to say, there's two words on that banner that are difficult to define. One is innovation, and the other one is acceleration. And maybe we can touch on both of those. So, welcome you two on stage. Francis, you came to tech via the Startup Institute. You are, as you showed already today, a skilled singer. Actually, let's give a hand to Francis. The song was amazing. And you're now the director at NUMA New York. NUMA is an accelerator that hails from France, first expanded to India, then to Berlin and New York. And you run 10-week programs. And it's a very exciting time for you. It's growing, and more companies come on board. Micah has been in the tech space for a long time, since the 90s, which doesn't mean you're old. I'm just saying it because I'm old myself. And the experience that you brought, it ranges from the NYU. You have had many involvements with initiatives around the city, mostly in the clean tech space. And now you're helping companies to accelerate in that very space as a managing director at UrbanX. UrbanX is an accelerator by BMW Mini division, together with Hacks, Hardware Accelerator.
Sorry, we're not with Hacks.
You're not with Hacks?
We don't work with Hacks.
Okay, sorry about that. I did my research wrong. TechCrunch, blame you. And UrbanX is doing 20-week programs for up to 10 startups. You invest $100,000 each. And I'm very glad you're both here today, because you have such a different background and perspective to this. So let's start with you, Francis. How do you define an accelerator?
Thank you. So I actually, coming from my background, so he mentioned I came into the ecosystem here in tech through an accelerator, but was focused more on people that wanted to start their careers in tech. So Startup Institute was founded by the managing directors of Techstars Boston, and it was built on that model of acceleration. And so what I define as an accelerator is a cohort-based program that has a set period of time, that has curriculum that's driven by actually people operating in the industry. So different than professors or in a university. And so I believe that that model can be applied in a number of different use cases that will drive outcomes. And so that could be for people in careers. I actually think before, when someone was like freelancers, I think you could actually have a program that provides community access, outcomes, and support for freelancers. It could be in the publishing industry. Maybe you could have an accelerator for opera singers that gives them access to the music industry. So that's my definition of an accelerator.
Micah, how would you define it, and why do you disagree?
Cool, thanks. Thank you for having me. It's cool to be in this this first gathering. So as you said, I helped to start New York City's first sponsored tech incubator with the support of Mayor Bloomberg and the EDC back in 2009. I guess the way that I look at the landscape is kind of there's a continuum from co-working spaces like WeWork and others to incubator programs, venture development, entrepreneurial support organizations that don't invest in the companies or organizations that they work with, and then to accelerators like Y Combinator, Techstars 500 of the world. And I think when I talk about an accelerator program to people in the industry, it is cohort based. There's a finite timeline. It's really about traction. It's help with customer development, product development. I think the biggest point of contention and where we'll disagree is around whether or not there's an investment made in the company. And I think that's a really important distinction because it aligns the interest of the company with the people who are operating the program, and it also speaks to the business model of the program. So in my previous role, you mentioned I was at NYU for 5 years. We had hotspot designation. There was some Startup New York funding. We had funding from federal government, state government, local government. We had corporate support, and that's basically how the program sustained itself, right? People could, it was more selective, I think, than a co-working space, but certainly a lot less rigorous and less selective than a true accelerator program. So the model now, what we do with UrbanX is it is incredibly selective. We accept somewhere around 2% of the companies who apply, and we do make an equity investment in those teams. So it's not, we don't have fixed terms like some other programs. We'll do safe notes, we'll do spas, we'll do convertible debt, but there is skin in the game. There is a long-term interest in the financial performance of the company.
So NUMA New York's model is obviously different. Can you maybe explain it briefly and also explain why you're still an accelerator?
All right. So NUMA globally, we're actually one of the older accelerator brands in the world. We started about 18 years ago in Paris, France. We're in 8 countries now around the world. We opened in New York because within our portfolio of over 400 startups, and NUMA is very proud of our 82% survival rate after 4 years, many of them were looking to expand into the US market at a certain stage and size. And we're coming across several different challenges in doing so. So it became pertinent that we open operations here. As a result, because we work with companies that are often, post Series A or are generating revenue. We had one company from the Ukraine making 20 million ARR when they entered the program. Those valuations are so high that the typical model of acceleration where you take equity just didn't make sense for the founders that we were equipped to support through our community, our network, the programming. And so in New York, different than all of the other NUMA locations, they all take equity. The only location, though, that has a fund is Mexico. But in New York, we take a flat fee for participation in the program. When we do, though, we're flexible. When we have a company maybe that is coming from an ecosystem that doesn't get as much funding, or is a slightly earlier stage company but makes sense in the market, we do take 3% of warrants in lieu of the flat fee. But based off of my definition of what makes an accelerator, we're providing all of the support, resources, access to get to a specific outcome for those companies. Most of our companies aren't looking for VC funding immediately after the program. That maybe their Series A or their Series B will come in the next 6 to 12 months, but they're really looking to build out business traction. And so the kinds of KPIs we set with our companies are different via the goals. So it could be around closing a certain number of pilots, it could be sales in the pipeline, it could be partnerships, it could be user acquisition. And I think accelerators are equipped to support a number of different outcomes and can be very holistic to the entire business. So we're still very much an accelerator, just our model and our outcomes are different.
How much do you charge?
$25K.
Per company flat fee?
Per company flat fee, yes.
Micah, would you still call that an accelerator?
No, I wouldn't. I like, in my mind, again, that is a venture development organization, entrepreneurial support organization, or an incubator. I think that's what the general public would kind of know it as. Not that, by the way, I don't think that the general public really cares. I think this is kind of a, to a certain extent, we can have a conversation and we can disagree for your benefit. Fundamentally, the reason why the incubator designation was actually important, I think, is because there are tax incentives and also there are economic development dollars that come with that incubator designation. So actually, in New York State, there was Assembly Bill 6550 that was passed where they have certified incubators now, and you are either a certified resident company of that with certain tax benefits, or you're not. I don't think that the accelerator group, and again, I'm not familiar with GAN, is lobbying for any tax incentives. Now, again, there are worthwhile distinctions, and I think there are worthwhile organizations, and you look at this with the National Venture Capital Association, private equity has similar kinds of lobbying organizations where they're advocating for certain tax policies. I don't think that the accelerator ecosystem has that intent, or at least if it does, like I'm certainly not aware of it. But there are bigger organizations like the NBIA, which is like the International Group of Business Incubators, has 2,200 members in like 62 countries around the world. And again, there are policy pushes around kind of where they want to go and the benefits that they want both the programs and then program participants to accrue. But I think again, like the traditional meaning when you speak to people who work in this field, when you talk about accelerators, again, you're talking about programs generally like YC.
So should it be an association? Do you think accelerators need a lobbyist group that actually fixes the semantics and also maybe fights for some tax bonus? So
in my mind, like I don't think so. I think it's fine for corporate accelerators and other kind of accelerators to call like that's. I think that's okay because the definition really is just like you have a program that helps things move quickly, right? And corporates in particular, I think, are generally looking at that, given how disruptive the environment is right now, and how much money there is in in the market to invest in new ideas. So I'm not so sure like how much the semantics actually matter, but I think an organization probably only makes sense if you're going to push for, again, certain favorable policies or for capital investment from government or from an industry trade group.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can ask the audience quickly. Do you raise your hand if you think there should be an accelerator association, a lobbyist group for accelerators? Is there anyone? I see one hand, two. That's not a lot. Three? Okay, so we can see that in a community there's not a particular interest in doing that because, and I think that harks back to you, there is so many ways to actually describe yourself as an accelerator. As a journalist, I would argue though, if you don't really know from the outside what it is, it's hard to not overuse the term, which maybe happened to actually the word innovation, which is used for so many things that people kind of like have a hollow feeling connected to it. So how are you going to prevent that from happening?
I mean, I think conversations like this here today, I think it is important that we do have an understanding of what an accelerator is. I love accelerators personally, and I really believe in the model, both as outcome drivers. I wouldn't be in tech today if it wasn't for Startup Institute and what that was. I think that they have potential to be big drivers in the future of work, in preparing people in a number of different settings to get jobs, to start their own businesses. I think it has a big place potentially in the future of education for a number of different industries. And so I think they're really important for access and for quick growth. And so I think the more that we're able to understand what that looks like, the easier it's going to be able to expand that and apply that in new verticals.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was just going to, I think that accelerators are a really interesting tool for proprietary deal flow, which a lot of early stage investors really struggle with. So you talk to a lot of folks who are investing at the seed stage, and proprietary deal flow is really, really difficult to come by. And so, I know that, our venture partner is a shop called Urban Us. They exclusively invest in urban tech. We're solely focused on startups who are reimagining city life. I think one of the really attractive propositions that we offer is this notion of proprietary deal flow, that they do get to work with companies for 5 months before they're then ready to follow on. For corporates, I think again, I work for a small group within BMW that's charged with trying to disrupt the company from the inside before it's completely disrupted from the outside. It is a tool. I don't think that there's any silver bullet. I think it's silver buckshot, and I think that accelerators are a tool for corporations to begin to work with startups. I think, unfortunately, most big corporates are not monoliths. They're kind of loosely affiliated fiefdoms, and most are really not set up to work with early stage companies. They don't know how to work with founders. The culture isn't there. There's no startup office, generally speaking. They might have a corporate venture arm, but again, generally speaking, they're not investing at the seed stage or pre-seed or pre-A. And so I think there's a real kind of cultural issue around the way that corporates work with accelerators. But I think, certainly since
Could you give an example for that? Like, how do people at BMW look at an accelerator that they have themselves?
Yeah. There are kind of three pathways in for early stage companies. So one is through iVentures, which is the $500 million corporate venture fund. Generally, though, like they're coming in at the B round, right? Then there's a venture client program called Startup Garage. And we've actually had companies come through our program and then go work with Startup Garage. So what they do is they find essentially internal R&D sponsors, and they help the startup actually get a supplier number, which is a really big deal when you're working with an automotive OEM. So they'll introduce them to other tier 1 suppliers, other OEMs, but they'll actually kind of buy the first proof of concept. They don't take any equity, they don't take any debt. It's kind of it's a venture client relationship. And then for us, we are as early as they will go. And we also get to do things that not only touch on mobility and transportation, but also are related to kind of beyond the car business models that are focused on the future of cities. So John Edgar is here from Stay. He was part of our first portfolio of investments. And John is not working on really anything related to automotive whatsoever, but really focused on data management for cities. And so it allows us to kind of open the aperture in terms of the kinds of things that the company might have impact their business model in the future.
Corporate discussion around accelerators is one of the biggest probably going on in big organizations right now. There's not a lot of understanding, which brings us back to the topic. And maybe before we head over to your questions in the audience, one very personal question: how do you actually explain what you're doing to your family, maybe to your grandparents, or they're still around, or your friends that are not from the accelerator space?
Yeah, my grandparents are always very confused around what I do and why I'm not singing on Broadway is their biggest concern. But I think I explain it in terms mostly of, who I'm helping and my outcomes. I usually don't necessarily use the term accelerator. If I do, I usually say it's a program that helps, companies or outcomes in a shortened period of time. So you're accelerating some sort of outcome. But I'm usually just say I'm helping, international startups expand their businesses into the U.S. market, which is about all they can handle.
What do you tell your non-accelerator friends?
Yeah. Most of my friends are non-accelerator friends, and they don't really care.
Proud of that?
What I do. I think generally what I'll say is I invest in startups who are reimagining city life, and then what does that actually mean? So our program is very focused on customer development, product development, traction, and then fundraising. And I think again that's an important distinction, because we talked a little bit about that in the previous conversation about like what's the metrics, what's kind of the value proposition, and I do think that unfortunately what you see is a lot of work around kind of will get you to your pitch and demo day, and then it kind of stops there, and that's very different from like managing a fundraising process. And I think that's a really critical, again, it's a critical point for programs where you're dealing with capital and you're helping companies kind of level up. And I would argue like I don't.
So
know.
aren't you more of a VC then than an accelerator?
Well, no. So I actually think that again, the lines are blurring a little bit, because you see so many venture funds who have head of platform who are helping companies with HR, et cetera, et cetera. But our first emphasis, like we find companies so early that they still need a lot of help in understanding like who's their customer, what are their channel economics, what's their go-to-market going to be. They need help with product development. So it's everything from kind of like design, engineering, software development, UX, UI help, like all of that stuff. We try to provide kind of an extension of the team to get them to some sense of product market fit. After that, then it is help with fundraising. And I think that is a critical value add, again, depending on like the segment that you're serving.
So I would see that then more as you are a VC that uses an accelerator program as a tool.
Well, so again, in our case, we are strictly a program. So we've partnered with a venture partner who has a fund, and committing follow-on investments post-program, again, I think is like a really critical metric. So, again, like in the last program, we had 7 companies in our 5-month program. 5 of the 7 now have committed follow-on investments from our venture partner. Mm-hmm. So I think like that's one of those threshold questions that I would be asking if I were considering going into an accelerator program. It's like, what's the follow-on rate?
Mm-hmm. So we see there at Accelerator Awesome, there's actually still a lot of talk needed to discuss where the space is going and what it actually means to run one. And I would be happy to use 4 minutes maybe we have left to take your questions around definitions and also shapes of accelerators that you're interested in. Yes, please come, if you want to join, please come on stage. That came from the heart. Is there another mic? Is there a mobile mic around?
Yeah, these are like attached.
Here's
one. I have just returned from the Aspen Ideas Festival, where there was a lot of reflection on, I guess, the sort of demise of the great American dream, and particularly the upward mobility of a lot of people who seem to be trapped by race, ethnicity, and access to opportunity. The question I have is, if you can talk a little bit more about what is the feeders into the accelerator programs, because a lot of accelerators have become like Ivy League universities. They are highly, highly selective in basically just picking the guaranteed successes because that's their business model. So what is the feeders into the accelerator programs that is helping, to give opportunity to people who cannot afford $25,000 fees? I've had a look at the curriculum of the Startup Institute. Once again, you either have to learn to code, or it's digital marketing, or it's sales. But what is that? Who is doing this layer of entry to entrepreneurship as a stepping stone for people who may not necessarily want to follow a 4-year university degree, but want to explore entrepreneurship?
Thank you. Great question. It's actually one that we are discussing today in the other room at our symposium and open mic stage. So thank you for contributing that. Do you want to respond briefly to it, or is there?
Yeah, I feel like there were a few different parts to that.
Yes.
I think in terms of education access, so we developed the model in New York differently because of the companies that we were looking to support. New York is a very expensive space, so for a business to be successful and thriving here, you need to have resources or it could kill the business. And so part of that is why there is also the flat fee. But when we do have startups that come from more interesting ecosystems that don't always get as much funding, female founders, that's when we do take the warrants, so they don't have to pay that flat fee. And I think, programs like Startup Institute, there was a fee to participate, but given like higher education and how expensive that is, I pay more for my student loan debt every month than I do for my rent in New York City, which is crazy. And so, while there was, by the time I left, I think it was around $10,000 for tuition for that program. It's still vastly less expensive than higher education, and the outcome I got from it and the amount of return and ROI on that was much higher. And then there's programs like C4Q is one as well in New York that works to, they're a nonprofit. They are one of the GFE partners here in New York, and they have a program to teach underprivileged people how to code and get jobs in tech. And so there are a number of different organizations that are building programs that way so that more entrepreneurs, more entrepreneurial people would be able to have access to opportunity.
Thank you, Francis. We also have a couple of students in the room from the Opportunity Network today, which is a nonprofit supporting high school students from around the city. So welcome, you guys. And thank you for this question. Thank you for the contribution. We have time for one more. Yes, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm from China. My company's situation is a little bit special. We have 2 factories over there back to overseas, and one of the factory called SMBC is already a public traded company in China. The situation for us is we bring the technology and we bring the hardware, our equipment. We want to do business here. So in China, we're already kind of big, but in US, we're nothing. I speak English, but I cannot use this kind of broken English to do the market sales, can do the marketing here. So my question is, can incubator help us to group a local team to do the real sales for us in US? Yes, I need money, but the most important thing is not money. I need a local team. I need a local networks. And some people, before I came here, some people told me, hey, you don't need to come here to meet incubators because they ask for like 7%, 10% of equity, and for you, you won't give like more than 5%. But so this is my question. Okay, how and where you guys help us, and how you guys can help us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's literally why we created NUMA, was for your type of company, for sure. And most of our companies, again, aren't looking to raise funding. That's not what they need. They have money, they have resources. They sometimes have already 200 plus employees in their country. But having that access to a network, to understanding how to adapt to the ecosystem, how to hire a local team to build out success here is what we focus on as an outcome.
So I'll just add, like, there are a number of government-driven consulate programs that help established companies like yours all the time. So like the Germans do this really well, the Dutch do this really well, French. So you don't need an incubator. You need to hire the right kind of people on the ground to help you bring your product to market here and help you sort out visa situations and so on and so forth, right? Tariff situations, what have you. You're way past incubator stage. Like, you don't belong in an incubator. You need to hire a local team to figure out your sales channel, your product strategy, et cetera, et cetera. But again, you have a publicly traded company in China?
Not me.
Right, not you, right. But you work for a publicly traded company in China, right?
They're working for us.
Okay, so I guess my point is like, when you think about the stages, like, congratulations, you've kind of made it, and now you're at a different stage. Hire a local team.
I think you came to the right spot to ask.
Network.
But we have to wrap up, unfortunately. Thank you for coming, and please continue the conversation. And thank you, Micah, and thank you, Francis.
All
Christine.
right. Thank you.